Settle down, class, settle down. I'm Assistant Professor DeSoto, and I'll be lecturing today. With the current economic turmoil occurring in Europe, I think it is important for you to understand the institution that is getting part of the blame for the economic meltdown, the European Union. With so many different economies tied together due to a shared currency, when one country begins to fail, it pulls down the whole system. This has also begun spilling over into the United States. I want to show you a short film clip as a short introduction to the topic. The European Union is a collection of 27 member nations who share an economic and political bond. They all exist on the continent of Europe and share the currency of the euro. But where did this major alliance come from, and why has it become such a major political and economic player in the world? And how does such a big entity with so many different interests govern itself? Well, to find all this out, we first have to look at how the EU was formed. The EU began as an economic agreement between 6 European nations shortly after the conclusion of World War II. The original EU nations were Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. These 6 nations went on to form the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951, and it was so successful that the 6 member nations moved to integrate their economies even more. So a short 6 years later, the European Economic Community, or EEC, was founded. The goal of this new entity was to eliminate trade barriers between the 6 member nations. The first enlargement of the EU did not occur until 1973, 22 years after the formation of the European Coal and Steel Community. But between 1973 and 1995, 9 more nations joined the alliance, and this alliance finally became informally known as the EU. The creation and the adoption of the euro by the European Union was a major world economic decision that still affects world economies today. The currency of the euro was first used on January 1st, 1999. This became the new currency for the EU except for the United Kingdom, Sweden, and Denmark. By the end of 2007, the EU encompassed most of Europe with 27 member nations. At the time, the EU was a collection of dozens of treaties. There have been different efforts by France and the Netherlands to make a constitution for the EU, but it's never really been accepted. However, in recent years, the Treaty of Lisbon has been signed, which brought major reforms to the Union and has acted like a constitution in the absence of one. It has streamlined trade between all member nations and officially changed the European Community to the European Union. The European Union's political system is unique due to it having supranational laws and legislation. What this means is that laws passed by the EU supersede laws created by the member nations, in most cases. But how does the EU pass and enforce laws on a supranational level? Well, similar to many constitutional democratic nations, the EU is made up of 3 branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial branches. Let's start with the executive branch. The executive branch itself is also subdivided into 3 parts: the European Council, the Council, and the European Commission. The European Council consists of all the leaders and heads of state from each member nation. The European Council must meet at least 4 times a year, and they also vote on a president to chair the European Council. That responsibility currently falls to Belgian Prime Minister Herman van Rompuy. The European Council has no legislative authority, but its goal is to guide the direction the EU will go in, and also acts as the crisis handling body. This is the closest thing to a president or head of state the EU has. The Council, although their names are similar, is separate from the European Council. The Council is made up of a minister from each member state and handles the responsibilities that may fall to the European Council when it is not in session. The European Commission is the 3rd and final division of the executive branch. The Commission also has a member from each member state, and each member is responsible for one or more policy area. Example of policy areas are protecting treaties, promoting the general welfare, and managing the budget. However, the Commission has very limited legislative powers, so the division is more of an investigative and fact-finding entity than a lawmaking one. The legislative branch is bicameral, similar to the US's, meaning it has two branches. The first branch is made up of each country's ministers, the same ministers from the Council. There are 345 votes in this branch, and voting power is distributed proportional to a country's population. The second branch is the European Parliament, with 736 seats. Seats are allocated by a country's population, and the representatives are elected by each member nation. The final of the three branches is the judicial branch, which houses the Court of Justice of the European Union. This court has 27 justices, one from each nation, and is the final authority when it comes to treaties, issues between EU institutions, and issues between EU member states. That is the basic history and structure of the European Union, and I hope this gave you a better understanding of this great institution.